2012, President Obama said that the use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime in the country's civil war would cross a red line, triggering American airstrikes. But when he crossed it in Syria, critics blasted Obama for not following through. The following year, U.S. Ambassador to Syria Robert Ford resigned over what he saw as a failure of Obama's Syria policy. Our Joce Sterman recently spoke with Ford and asked if he had any regrets.
I have one big regret, which is that the Syrians in the opposition always thought that we would send in our military to save them from Bashar al-Assad. And as much as I told them it wasn't going to happen, they didn't believe me. They just kept thinking America, Statue of Liberty, land of freedom, they'll come.
But America didn't come. Not after Assad used chemical weapons on his own people in 2013, and not after he continued to violate ceasefire after ceasefire negotiated by former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry.
If the U.S. had taken strong military action immediately after the use of chemical weapons by Assad and that infamous speech about the red line, do you think things would be any different?
Well, I do. Had we done a short but stern strike, we might have given impetus to the Syrian government to go to the Geneva talks, which were 4 months later, and actually engage seriously with the opposition to find a political settlement.
The civil war in Syria that began in 2011 as a city protest against an unpopular president spiraled into chaos as hundreds of opposition groups, including ISIS, fought for control of the country. More than 400,000 Syrians have been killed. And the mass exodus of millions has created a crisis in Europe and helped launch a populist movement around the world.
Outside of those very obvious humanitarian concerns, can you tell us why the average ordinary American should care in terms of strategy about what's happening in Syria?
We have U.S. military forces in combat operations in Syria. And I don't think many Americans understand that, but we have about 400 U.S. Special Operations Forces deployed next to Syria or in Syria, helping with Syrian fighters against the Islamic State, against Daesh. Every day with new combat operations, there's a risk to our own young people in uniform who are over there. We have seen how extremists operating out of Syria have attacked cities like Paris, like Brussels, in Belgium, in Germany. And so how to get rid of this extremist element in Syria is a concern to all Americans. We don't want what happened in Paris to happen in an American city.
Russia has stepped into the power vacuum, sending thousands of troops and launching airstrikes that helped Assad regain control of Aleppo, Syria's largest city, last December. The Obama administration was outraged by Russia coming to Assad's rescue, but the new administration is calling for cooperation with Russia.
I think if there's a way that we can combat ISIS with any country, whether it's Russia or anyone else, and we have a shared national interest in that, sure, we'll take it.
Can they be a strong ally for us in this battle against ISIS?
Well, I think they could be if they wanted to be, but I'm not sure they want to be. The primary purpose of the Russian intervention had nothing to do with fighting the Islamic State. Going forward, does Vladimir Putin want to turn 90 or 100 degrees and focus instead on the Islamic State? That's up to Vladimir Putin. I think were he to make that decision, then there might be room for the United States to cooperate with the Russians.
And if you were in this new administration, what would you tell them at this point?
Don't think the Americans can fix these problems by themselves, because they can't. They are going to need allies. And I think Americans should be asking themselves, are we going to be in this kind of war forever and ever? Is that really our destiny? Or are we going to start dealing with some of the politics that helped create the situations over there in the first place?
And we are already seeing that first political move. CIA Director Mike Pompeo in Turkey this week. It's his first official trip and possibly the first step to restarting relations with a country that is key to our strategy in Syria, Sharyl.
So interesting to hear from the ambassador. He's very clear. Thanks, Joce.